Oh. Hi. Okay, hopefully my phone will stay propped up there. I know nobody's watching just yet, but that's fine with me. I'm a bit nervous, and I hope the rain isn't too loud in this video, but it's the best lighting I could do is outside at the moment on a rainy day. It's just too dark inside. So anyway, I'm here to talk about an important issue today. I'm here to talk about suicide. On the 8th of September, it was Are You OK Day, where we were meant to ask people if they were okay. On the 10th of September, it was World Suicide Prevention Day. And on the 10th of October, which is coming, it's World Mental Health Day. Also in Australia, October is a really big month for mental health events across Australia. And in Canberra, ACT Mental Health Week is the second week of October, from the 9th to the 15th. I want to start off by giving you some interesting and really awful statistics about suicide. Firstly, across the world, there are 800,000 people a year who die from suicide. It's already making me emotional. That means that one person dies of suicide every 40 seconds. Every 40 seconds. There are, excuse me, I just have to gather myself. There are 25 times as many, again, who make a suicide attempt. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death worldwide, and 75% of suicides worldwide are committed in developing nations. More men die from suicide than women, 1.5 times more in developing nations, and a whopping 3.5 times more in developed nations. In Australia, 8 people die from suicide every day. That's on average around 2,500 per year. In our tiny population of 23 million, in 2014, 2,864 people died from suicide. Just let that sink in. Why am I doing this presentation? I'm not even sure how to share this with you, because it feels like I'm sorry. It feels like a really unsafe thing for me to talk about. A year ago today, I just barely survived a suicide attempt. But I really want to turn my experience into something positive. By sharing this, I hope to work to break down stigma, reduce fear, and start to make the conversation around suicide a little bit more comfortable. There are a lot of negative beliefs about suicide. People often describe suicide as weak, selfish, or cowardly, sinful, or a crime. But suicide is about a person being in pain. And it can affect anyone. If you've thought about suicide, that doesn't by default mean that you're somehow less than other people. Suicide isn't reserved for the uneducated, the weak, the poor, a particular race, religion, or any other particular subset of society. Anyone can find themselves in a position where suicide might seem like an option. Sure, the pressures of lower socioeconomics, poor health, mental health problems, and discrimination are all factors that can increase the risk of suicide. However, none of these things equate to some sort of underlying weakness, cowardice, or special trait of selfishness. It is not an act of cowardice to attempt suicide. The reality is, suicide is a terrifying experience. Making the decision to end one's own life is a terrifying, confusing, difficult, and painful thing to do. Taking action towards our own death goes against our very human nature, our core survival instinct. It's not part of the human condition to want to die, and people generally strive to survive through all sorts of circumstances, even where we might consider it reasonable that they could decide they've had enough. I know as I took steps towards my own death, I had to fight my body's desire to stay alive. I was utterly afraid. My body was in fight or flight mode, and I had to push through that. My heart pounded loudly and fiercely, my head spun, and I felt completely physically sick. A short while later, curled up in the fetal position in my bed and passing out, my heart was still pounding in my head, thumping out a terrified message, screaming at me to live, 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 live. And I recall trying to soothe myself, repeating over and over, "It's okay, it'll be over soon. It's okay, it will all be over soon." I hope that you're beginning to understand that knowing someone has attempted suicide tells you almost nothing about them. There is really only one assumption you can make. Something was terribly wrong for them, but not with them. Suicide is a complicated thing and stems from a unique set of circumstances for every individual involved. Some people are in so much pain that they see no other option. People might be feeling exhausted, trapped, overwhelmed or afraid, or self-hating, and a myriad of other painful feelings. Depression as an illness can also cause significant distortion of thought processes, and under those circumstances all sorts of outcomes are possible. Importantly though, a person doesn't even have to be depressed to consider suicide. Based on their life circumstances, they can sometimes feel like it's the only available option. And as much as many of us wish it weren't, it really is an option. So we have to get real about discussing suicide. In my case, I was not depressed. I was, however, in a huge amount of emotional pain. I was utterly isolated, exhausted beyond belief due to long-term sleep deprivation and the pressures in my life. And for over a year, I had been experiencing incredibly high levels of sustained and unrelenting stress. To explain my actions, I think I would have to plead temporary insanity. As crazy as it sounds, when I attempted suicide, I honestly believed I was being a good parent. For a number of reasons, I had come to the conclusion that it was the best thing for my child if I was out of the picture. So in my mind, I was sacrificing myself for my child. A very short half an hour later, I was unconscious. As demonstrated here, these things can happen very quickly and quietly. Like I said earlier, 8 people die in Australia every day from suicide. That's 56 people a week, about 240 people a month. It's an astonishing figure, and it tells me that as a society we are failing. So what can we all do? I have a lot of ideas. The main one I can think of is building stronger, more cohesive communities that support each other instead of standing by and observing people as they struggle on alone. I'm not religious, but I do think this is something church communities do well. When a child is born or someone gets sick in a church community, people tend to deliver meals and provide various other forms of support. The community swarms around, maybe even annoyingly, but the people who are struggling definitely know they don't have to do so alone. So yeah, as communities, I think we can really do better. I think we can find ways to build stronger connections, educate ourselves and our communities on how to effectively help others, to help each Sorry, I'm not even reading anything emotional, I'm just emotional now. To help each other in times of need and reduce the heightened sense of isolation that so many people feel in desperate times. Excuse me for a sec. We also need to stop thinking of suicide in judgmental terms. Instead, we need to bring more understanding and compassion to the conversation. When a person attempts suicide, they are in a really desperate state. If they think they're likely to be judged, they're not going to reach out for help, which is the step that's most likely to prevent suicidal action. I believe the judgment of others exponentially increases the risk of a suicide. What I'm trying to get at is isolation equals heightened risk. So let's make an effort to help people feel less isolated. When you think of someone, send them a text. It's easy, it only takes a minute, and it might be the one thing that helps the recipient get through their day. At the very least, they'll be chuffed that you thought of them. And you might think of them often, but if you don't tell them, how will they know that they matter to you? If you know a person is struggling, don't just reach out to them once and not try again if they say they're fine. Make a personal commitment to stay in touch with them. Contact them regularly. Even add it as a repeating item in your calendar or set an alarm in your phone to remind you to reach out to that person. It's incredibly meaningful to have this kind of contact, even if it's really basic text messages. We also need to think about our reactions. You need to decide what kind of friend you want to be. Do you want to be the friend who is most trusted to respond appropriately in times of trouble? Maybe your answer is yes, but your immediate internal feeling about suicide is a negative comment about how people who attempt suicide are somehow bad. In that case, you need to examine your understanding of suicide, get educated, and work on your own reactions and feelings about this. Because I promise you, your friend needs your support more than they need your judgment, and you're going to feel much better about yourself if you're the supportive one rather than the judgmental one. I received a huge range of reactions. One of the people who found me unconscious about 7 hours after I had overdosed quickly gossiped, exaggerated, and used my story to inflate her social importance. She added mortifyingly humiliating details that never happened and capitalized on my pain to further her gain. Others who had said all year that they were amazed I hadn't completely fallen apart yet disappeared the second I hit rock bottom. Never heard from again. Apparently they were only interested in me while I was superhuman. Some people decided my suicide attempt was too big for them to deal with and backed right off. Others stepped up, showed up, and even intentionally deepened their friendship with me because they knew I was in need. My favourite, oh, this is so emotional, this sentence. My favourite initial response was from a friend who came to see me in hospital. You know who you are. Who said with a quivering bottom lip and solid eye contact, "I am really glad you're still here." A couple of people came to see me in hospital and gave me hugs, but visitors were really few and far between. Later on, a group of people tried to help me to prepare for being back at home. But I chickened out of that one, as it was too overwhelming and I was just super embarrassed. Universally, people didn't really know what to say or what to do, and when they asked what I needed, I often had no idea what to suggest. This was for two reasons. First being that I still didn't really know where to begin for myself. The second reason was that I didn't want to bother anyone or be a bother to anyone. I certainly didn't feel worthy of their attention or assistance. Honestly, as everyone's situation is unique, I can't give you all the answers to what to do for them, but I can say that doing something is always better than doing nothing. The most important thing is to make sure you don't leave them feeling abandoned. Send a text message, visit, offer to have a cup of tea together. To stay connected. That's it, stay connected. Ask what they need to get done, and maybe there's something in their list you can take on. Even small acts of kindness can make a really big difference. It's better to try and make mistakes than to leave your friend feeling like you don't care enough to try. So above all, do not allow your fear to leave your friend more isolated than ever. The above strategies work as reactions as well as prevention. But I have one last thing to say about prevention. If you have kids, start talking about how to deal with difficult emotions. Teach them a longer list of emotions than anger and happiness. Communicate with your kids about what to do if they're feeling bad. They might not feel comfortable telling you, so also give them numbers for Kids Helpline and even Lifeline. Get them thinking about who they might feel comfortable talking to, such as a favourite teacher, the school counsellor, their sports coach, and so on. Expand their understanding of various emotions. Increase their emotional vocabulary. Be proactive and do the best you can to avoid having to react to an act of desperation on their part. On World Suicide Prevention Day, on the 10th of September, the theme words were connect, communicate, and care. I think if you keep these 3 words in mind, you'll always be on the right track. And if you're still watching through all this blubbering and snot and stuff, thank you for hanging in there. I'm going to provide some links to resources in the comments, and thank you.